You are listening to the Novel Writing Podcast, episode 31. Grab a cup, cozy up, and let's get to writing. Today's episode is the 27th of 60 daily episodes that pair with the videos from Haley's 60-day novel writing challenge. You can watch the first 5 days of the challenge for free on Haley's YouTube channel, and the link to that is in the description. Day 27 of the challenge is about writing a series. First off, Haley's video today is about the first book in your series. I want to talk about the rest of your series. This goes for if you're not only working on book 1, but also if you're working on any of the rest of the books in your series. One of the most important things we need to remember as authors of a multi-book series is to tie up loose ends and make sure that details are consistent. A good way to keep track of those things is to basically have a Bible for your universe. I use Notion to store all of my character, world, and story information, and that tool is extremely versatile to meet your needs. There's also World Anvil, which I've heard a lot of good things about. But beyond just keeping track of everything in one place, rereading your first or your second or your nth book prior to outlining the next book in your series keeps the storyline and loose ends fresh in your mind. Often, several years can pass between the first book in a series and the last book in the series. For Haley with the Tally series, it's 20 years. Catching those open loops from prior books gives you more things to tie up in the current book or in the last book. It can also give you ideas for how to reference back to things from prior books or bring an element from an earlier story into the final story for a type of closure. That all being said, we want to make sure that each book in the series has its own arc, its own plot, and that each individual story is wrapped up within the container of that book, instead of ending on a huge cliffhanger that leaves the plot unresolved. And that last part is crucial. If you do end a book on a cliffhanger, make sure that the rest of what the characters worked to overcome wraps up in that book. In my second book, The Prophet's Ruin, it does end on a cliffhanger, but the plot of book 2 came to its conclusion. It left things set up for book 3. But it doesn't leave readers wondering if the point of book 2 ever got made. Another good example of this is the second book in Naomi Novik's Scholomance series. The plot of book 2 resolves by the last page, but it ends on a cliffhanger that honestly left my jaw on the floor, and it made me very impatient for book 3. But it didn't leave me hanging on whether the plot got wrapped up, and that's what's important. Next, I want to talk about the cast of characters that won't make it into the first book. You might have ideas for characters that you desperately want to write, but they just don't fit into the story of the first book. So they get to sit on the sidelines for a while, maturing in the back of my creative brain while I figure out the rest of the story. And sometimes, interesting characters that have no real role in the main story can turn into subplots that stage a mutiny. We don't want that to happen. When I wrote books 1 and 2, I had characters that I really wanted to include, and I wrote scenes for them. They're characters that have lasted since the first inkling of this story back when I was 12, but they just had no place with what I did end up writing. So they're probably going to be introduced in book 3 as characters with roles that are essential to the plot of book 3, but their actual stories I have to save for standalones or a mini-series later. Having those characters sit on the sidelines for a while let me figure out how to better include them. It let me decide their backstory, and it lets me weave in that backstory to the events of book 1 and 2, so that it makes sense for when they show up in book 3 and then beyond. They kind of get to marinate for a while in the overall storyline without actually being involved, and that's kind of delayed gratification for writing. My last little suggestion for doing series is that you can use each book in the series to explore different character relationships as subplots. My books are young adult fantasy, but they all have a romantic subplot going on. So far, in books 1 and 2, I've gotten to explore those relationships, and I am looking forward to fleshing out the romance subplot in book 3. That is it for this companion episode to writing a series. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you tomorrow for day 28. Thanks for listening to the Novel Writing Podcast. If you're ready to stop struggling and start finishing your novel, check out the 60-Day Novel Writing Challenge. It's a step-by-step program designed for solo writers to complete their first draft with clarity and focus. Visit the link in the description to learn more.